You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to another wonderful show with a fabulous guest. We have Dr. André Martin, who is a renowned organizational psychologist and culture strategist, former talent leader at Nike, Google, Mars, and Target, and author of Wrong Fit, Right Fit. He helps leaders design people-first cultures where teams thrive and organizations unlock their full potential. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. It's good to be here. How you doing today?
It's great. It's great to have you here. Wow, what a resume.
I appreciate it. For a kid who grew up in the Ozark Mountains in the middle of nowhere, it's been quite a ride.
Yes, well, we will get round to your story in a bit, but first of all, I'd love to hear more about your whole, what you're writing about in your book, Wrong Fit, Right Fit. What's going on with teams? Start helping me understand what is going on now in the world with teams and how you're working with them and what we need to do.
Yeah. So, Wrong Fit, Right Fit, I wrote a couple years ago, and it was really built on this idea that there was just an intense level of disengagement happening in the world, right? Coming out of the pandemic, what we saw is global engagement was like low engagement was costing us about $9.6 trillion of productivity a year globally. And when you think about that number, I really look at it from two vantage points. The first one is what's happening to put employees in a place where they just aren't bringing their discretionary effort to their company every day. And on the other side, why aren't companies creating places where people can't wait to come to every Monday morning? And so the book was about 150 interviews of people just starting out their careers all the way up to CEOs of top companies. And I asked two simple questions. The first one was, tell me about a time in your life when you couldn't wait to get to work every single day. And then tell me about a time in your life when that wasn't true.
Right. That is fascinating because you were just saying before, and I was a little surprised, that job satisfaction is at an all-time high, which I find incredible. I wouldn't have thought it's at an all-time high because how can the job satisfaction be at an all-time high when the engagement is an all-time low?
It's a question that I've been jumping into just this week for my newsletter that I run. And one of the things I saw was that job satisfaction, if you think about that idea, it's simply about, am I here and do I feel content? Right? So when you think about the factors in that, one is, do I have flexibility? Second one is, do I have security? Third one is, do I feel like this job that I have right now is better than the alternatives I could get? So it's really like the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy.
Really?
Right? Am I being fed and watered?
Wow.
And you think about that's very different than engagement, because engagement is all about, am I all in? Am I going to bring everything I have to the table? And when you think about engagement, that's built on things like, do I have peers that I care about? Do I feel like the company has a purpose that matters to me? Do I have autonomy and control over my day-to-day? And so you can have high job satisfaction, right? The company's meeting my basic needs in comparison to the other options I have. But you can have really low engagement and high burnout because people just don't feel connected in the way that they should.
That is fascinating to me, that the level that satisfaction is so low. That's very low. So what I'm getting, okay, that's mind-boggling because I would have just lumped them all together. Like, oh, you must be satisfied. So satisfied doesn't actually mean happy. Okay, so you're satisfied that it's not so bad. Basically, it's not so bad, but I'm not going to jump out of bed and run to work because I just love my work and I love the people I work with. It's okay.
It's okay.
All right. So the burnout. So what you're saying is they're satisfied because it's paying the bills. It's okay. However, why are they burning out? Why are people so burnt out? I hear that every day. What is going on nowadays with burnout? Is it because we put a title on it so we can say everybody's burnt out? Or is there actually more burnout?
Here's what I think is happening, Jean. And I love this idea of burnout that the Nagoski sisters wrote about probably about 2 years ago as well, about the same time my book came out. And the way that they defined burnout changed my entire mentality around it. What they said is burnout isn't about overwhelm in the moment. It's not about too many meetings and too many demands and too many places and things that I have to juggle. Burnout is actually about the idea that we're not going all the way through stress cycles. So what's happening to us is we get back to a level of just being good enough. I can survive. I can get out of bed the next morning. But we're carrying the weight of that stressor that we never fully went all the way through. And so when you think about COVID, you think about macroeconomic uncertainty, you think about wars and travesties and all these things that are happening. Those are just building up and building up and building up. So we are looking at ourselves today going, I've had all these stressors. I haven't gone all the way through any of those cycles. And so today feels harder than yesterday. And that's sort of what's happening.
Right. What you're saying is we're not fully renewing. We're not getting to a point of where it used to be where people would say, oh, I just need the weekend to get back on track. So what you're saying is the weekends, they're never quite catching up. So there's the residual and it's never rejuvenated. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a really very elegant way to put it, Jean. And back in, many years ago, I was a sports psychologist. I used to work with elite athletes. And one of the things we know from elite athletes is they understand recovery. They understand that in order to be at their optimal performance in the biggest match of their lives, they can't practice endlessly every day leading up to it. We just haven't learned that in corporate America. We are basically triaging ourselves through our days, getting back to a point where I can get up and come in tomorrow versus actually saying, hey, what does recovery look like? And even more importantly, how do we build companies that could honestly say to the next employee they hire that come to work here and you're going to walk out healthier? I mean, imagine how cool that would be.
Well, wasn't Google trying to do that when you were working for them?
Well, Google kind of took a little bit of a different stance on it. What they were really trying to do was just say, hey, if we surround you with every single perk and abundance you could ever need, from laundry to micro kitchens to beautiful meals, then maybe you'll stay longer and you'll be more productive. That's not actually recovery. That's just abundance. Like that's just giving people more abundance so they feel
right.
A little bit more sort of what I would say satisfied versus engaged.
Except for those sleeping pods. That sounded amazing to me when I was still working. I thought I would do anything to have a little nap pod because I'd love to lie down for half an hour. Okay. So
yeah, hey, don't get me wrong. The sleeping pods, the micro kitchens, the massages on Thursdays, those things were all real. But here's the problem that you run into, right? Is that do I have the time to take advantage of those perks? And by taking an hour to get a massage or sleep, and I actually just causing myself more stress because then I have to add a meeting at the end of the day to make up for that hour.
Right. So it's true. It wasn't based on health. And I've been into the Google like free kitchen, right? And I was thinking, a lot of this food, it's just not healthy and you're probably eating more because you're bored, right? It's like, gee, I think we get some free candy bars, right? Or there's an array of sweet cereals they had. Okay, so what did you learn from these large companies?
Well, in the book, I learned so much from the interviews that we did. And a couple of things that stand out was, one is there's no right way to design a company, right? There just isn't. Every one of the companies are beautifully imperfect. And they all have their own way of working, how they kick off teams, how they socialize ideas, how they manage conflict, develop people, how they manage time in their calendars, right? And what I was seeing is that companies actually were departing from their natural way of working, right? They were sort of saying there's these best practices out here. I need to be more like Google. I need to be more like Facebook. I need to be more like Nike. And the truth is every company has a secret decoder ring of success, a best way that they like to work. And if they were a little bit more clear about what that looked like, and they were unapologetic about it, they might actually get the right talent to come in and work for them that actually works the same way they work.
Well, I feel like Amazon is pretty upfront about this is a relentless workplace. And if you are relentless, you will. I think they're pretty clear about that, which is a different message from Google, right?
It was interesting, Jean, way back when, if you go back about 10 years, Amazon had a really big expose in the New York Times, if you remember. They had 27,000 Amazonians who created a website talking about how hard it was to be there. What was really about that moment for Amazon is I think they learned an important lesson about what we just talked about is, hey, they were trying to talk about how they were this great place. Leadership was important. It was all these things. And in truth, they had a certain way that they like to work. And for a certain number of people, that sort of competitive, relentless sort of approach to work really would have been enough. But what they wanted is they wanted to look good to everybody. And we all know, right? If we try to be everything to everybody, we're kind of nothing to anybody.
I was watching a documentary about that fairly recently. They did not handle it well. I think some of those people got fired for speaking out. They were dismayed at the reaction was not a solution from Amazon's leaders. So I don't know what they're doing now, but it's definitely a relentless culture, and they're pretty open about it being relentless now, I guess.
And I guess just to close the chapter on that, one of the things I think that happened was two things. One, for the employees who were dissatisfied, I think they felt like they bought a bill of goods, right? That who Amazon said they were in the interview maybe wasn't who Amazon was every day. And hey, there's two sides to that coin. We have to do a better job of really researching the companies we're getting ready to join. And companies need to just be a lot more transparent about who they are and how they like to work.
I think the word actually is honest.
Yeah.
Transparency is one thing. Honesty is a different thing. Okay. I think it's actually not really being honest about how things really are. And I think a lot of companies, big and small, because I've certainly had an array of jobs in my life that were not with big companies. And I remember just thinking, this is nothing like what is explained to me on purpose, right? Because they have to promise more to get the person to work there. And then it's like, this is not what I signed up for, literally.
And that might be the greatest fallacy of recruiting. One of the analogies I used in the book was this idea of recruiting is just one big dating app, right? Employees show up, and think about this. We've done this ourselves, right? We show up in our best clothes, coiffed to the T's. We've rehearsed our answers. We've got this beautifully sort of organized resume. We're not actually who we are every day, of the year. We're actually showing our best selves. And then companies did the same thing, right? They said, here's who we are. Here's how we work. These are all the great things about being here. And in truth, what I want for everybody is to say, like, let's all be a little bit more honest, right? Let's be super clear as employees about what we're looking for, what we're solving for, how we like to work, what we're actually good at, instead of making a resume that makes us look like superheroes. And on the company side, let's get really clear about how we like to work. And just on the front end of every job description says, here's what it's like to work here. If this is your brand of crazy, come and join us, right?
I'm with you because I used to be an executive recruiter for Wall Street. Okay. These were high level people. And it was just always interesting to me that it was always the same thing. It doesn't matter what level of puffing up stuff. And we had to see through that. That's an exaggeration. That's probably an exaggeration. You're correct. We used to have to coach them on what they had to wear to go into the investment bank to get the next, $3 million a year job or whatever. Okay. I literally remember telling a guy, please don't wear that brown suit because the brown suit was just anathema. Like, you never wear a brown suit. We couldn't believe he didn't know not to wear a brown suit to an interview. That was like, you don't do that. Isn't that funny? I guess now maybe people might wear a brown suit, but I don't think so. Okay. So this is highly interesting. So what about, you're talking about collective confidence. I was interested in that. Tell me more about that. What do you feel collective confidence is? Well, you write about it, so you must have some idea. And why is this important?
So I'll start with what it is. So really from back in my days, again, as an athlete and a sports psychologist, working with teams, you would see teams who just looked like every time they walked out in the field, they were going to win. You just saw it in their eyes. You saw it in the way they walked onto the pitch. You saw it in how they played. And really, so collective confidence is this idea of it's an unwavering belief that together we have the capability to achieve greatness. It's the group level of self-confidence, right? And what I found in this book and in my research over the last 20 years is it's both buildable and something that the team leader can curate over time. And so we often think that the winning streak is the most important thing to building confidence. And that actually isn't true, right? Confidence is built in 6 actions that leaders can take. I'll give you a couple, Jean, then we can jump in if you want to. But the first one, which I loved, was, hey, if you don't have self-confident individuals, you're never going to have a confident team, right? So it starts with, hey, are you bringing in people that feel like they have the skill to do something great, right? Secondly is this idea of contributory confidence, right? I might be really self-confident, I might be really skilled, but if when I join this new team, if I don't see a place for my skills, a place for my knowledge, or people don't recognize me for the expertise and superpowers that I bring, I won't succeed, neither will that team. Another one that was really curious to me was this idea of what matters more than a streak of success is small wins early in the life cycle of the team, right? The greatest coaches, the greatest teams, they do some really interesting things, right? They say, hey, when we get together early, we're going to make sure that in analogous situations, in low stakes environments, we're going to have the opportunity to win together. So we know what winning feels like before the stakes get high. And for this book, I talked to some really interesting people. I talked to the head of naval operations for the U.S. Navy. I talked to professional sports coaches and team members. I talked to a guy that runs one of the biggest camps at Burning Man. I talked to a really successful PE firm and really sort of chose these teams that are doing some really interesting and innovative things to build confidence so they can meet this dynamic, this chaotic, this uncertain environment that we're all living in. And you probably see this with yourself, but with the executive teams I work with every day, the number one thing I'm seeing is, God, they have 200 years of experience. They have all the capability they need, and they're hesitating. And part of that is I think they're hesitating because they don't have the confidence that they're going to succeed. And that's all they need to kind of tip the scales.
For sure. Well, actually, coaches, we know that you want to help your clients get just a quick win so that there's a muscle, the muscle's being used of, okay, I got to win it. Now we have a habit starting of winning. But that's interesting that these people have wins. They have, obviously, people you've worked with are highly successful. And I've worked with some of those people too. And it's interesting to me that they lack confidence. Why is that? Is it fear of making a mistake? That it's been going okay, but if I make the mistake, then I'm going to fall from grace? What do you think that is?
I think there's a couple things going on. I'd love to hear sort of what you're seeing as well. The first thing is it's just really hard to be a leader today. Because 9 times out of 10, every time you open your mouth, you're going to offend somebody or hurt somebody's feelings or make someone not want to follow you today. And I think that's very different than leading yesteryear, where everybody just sort of blindly followed who was highest in the food chain. And so that idea of like even being a leader is really hard. That's the starting point. I think secondly is there's just so much uncertainty in this moment in time, so much sort of erratic changes in performance and policy and all these things that we have to steer towards, is it really feels hard for leaders to get their feet, right? To say, God, I feel like I understand what's coming, so I can sort of put my capability, my insight towards it. I think the third thing is simply that, hey, part of the issue is that we came out of nearly a decade of pretty amazing economic growth, at least in the US. It was really easy to be a leader, right? Up until COVID hit. I mean, those years, those quarters, it was like 18 quarters of consistent economic growth in the US. When you think about that, we have a whole generation of leaders that just weren't prepared.
It was easy for them. It's almost like that thing of it's really easy to make money on the stock market when all stocks are high. And people think they're, right. That thing of they think they're absolute gods because they had Cisco in the day, right? That was maybe right. Before your time. Everybody thought they were the best investor in the world. And they all thought they were amazing investors in real estate before 2008, right? Yeah. Because anybody can make money. I think what you're saying, I think there's a correlation there between an investor who makes a lot of money when anybody can make money and a leader who could lead when it was so easy because everything was going so well. Is that, right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And what I'd say is, what I think in many ways, the companies even I worked for failed those leaders, right? Because we sort of let them continue to be who they were and didn't really push them hard enough or give them the tools, even though we knew this time was coming,
Right.
Right. It happened in 2008. It was bound to happen again.
Yep.
Right. Whether it was a pandemic or an economic downturn, something was coming, and we got as comfortable as they did in saying, God, why would we muck around with anything? Let's just let the thing run until it doesn't run. And that's just, I look back now, I'm like, God, that was just faulty thinking.
Bad
Right.
planning, actually.
It was magical thinking is what
magical
we were suffering
thinking
from.
And no planning. No, actually, I've thought a lot about that human beings know when something's up, it's going to go down, right? But we don't want to plan for that. And I find that extraordinary that everybody in real estate, the experts, they all know there's a cycle. I know many real estate experts, and they say, Jean, we know there's a cycle. We all know. But for some reason, there's this amnesia that it's just like, oh, it's all going to be fine. But it's like that for everything. It's also for our mental state. When we are in a state of high adrenaline and we're all excited, we all know we're going to drop. We're probably got a little bit of dysemia or a little depression. When the adrenaline pours out of our body and we're like, oh, here I am again, right? When you have exciting, I know now to plan for that. When I'm all excited about something, I'm like, okay, this is going to go down and I'm going to be tired and I'm going to have a bit of a low. Okay. Most people don't think that way. They forget they're going to have a low. And I think that financially, we forget that there's an ebb and a flow and nobody's planning for it. And let's look at this. Most Americans aren't planning for retirement. It's like they think they're never going to die or get old. What is up with that? Right? It's the Peter Pan culture, right?
It is. And there's a couple things that, again, in the new book that I found really interesting around confidence is there's a place where it tips too far, right? And there's two sort of things that can happen if you become overconfident. On one side, that can be a result of invincibility. Quarter after quarter of positive growth. I mean, we basically tell everyone, you're a star, just stay who you are. And it's like, no, that's the last thing you want to do. You got to keep growing. You got to keep learning. You got to keep getting better. But when you have this string of really great successes, you can think you're invincible.
Right.
And that's super dangerous. On the other side is hubris. It's when a leader believes that they can do something that's beyond their team's capability. Right. And that's just as dangerous, like that sense of unwavering belief that we can do anything. It's just not true. There's limits. We're human.
It's interesting. I've thought a lot about that recently. I was just thinking about this yesterday, actually. The Steve Jobs reality distortion field. You know about that, right?
Yep.
Well, they're kind of criticizing that a lot. And I'm thinking, well, actually, he wouldn't have achieved with his teams any of that if he didn't have that really unrealistic, distorted field. His whole thing about don't be afraid you can do this. Now, you're saying that's a potential problem. I agree with you because he wasn't a good leader and he knew it. However, somehow he did create a lot because of that. So there is a sort of, it's not black and white for me. You can be a lovely team leader, but you might not get all that you could possibly get out of your team if you don't have this sort of reality distortion field that he had. Now, he's exceptional, and not many people can pull that one off, right? And also, he was a bad leader in many other ways, and he knew it. So where's the balance where you instill confidence of, yes, we can do this. Let's do our best. And let's see what happens. We don't say we might fail, but we know we might fail because y'all know you might fail. That's just life. So you're saying it's a problem if there's overconfidence because then the team gets demoralized?
Well, I think you can ask the team to do things that they're not capable of doing. And then you start this cycle of sort of spiraling performance, right? If you're asking me to do it, I'm not sure I can. If I don't achieve success right away, then I start to lose self-confidence. That starts to cause relationships to ebb and flow and deteriorate. And then we start to lose confidence as a collective. I think what is interesting about Steve Jobs, right, is I would love to be able to go back and talk to him now and say, was it truly magical thinking, or were you just unbelievably aware of the talent that was below you and that they had potential that they hadn't tapped? Because that's different. Hubris is like, we can do anything, right? It's the pharmaceutical company Thanos that went out and she just we can do anything. We can do all this stuff. And it was couldn't happen. And she didn't listen to people who were saying it's not happening. We're actually not.
She was a con person. She was a con artist.
And she also had a lot of hubris.
She did,
right?
but
So
there was a whole psychological. She was a fake. I mean, she was
100%.
100% faker. Steve Jobs was not a fake. Okay, that's different.
Nope.
She was just a con artist that was really good at selling an idea. She knew early on it was never going to work. Oh, we can do it. There was so much going on there. Okay, that's a case apart because you're dealing with an actual very high level con artist. Really.
100%. And often, that's what hubris results in. And so I think Steve Jobs I believe he had a really acute sense that he was surrounded by people who had yet to achieve everything they could. And so the other thing he did is, if you look at the way that Apple progressed, it was little by little by little by little, they created this unbelievably innovative approach to technology. And I think that, again, with Tim Cook, you continue to see they're incremental.
Yes.
And what that allows the team to have wins and get reps and get smarter and get better and get stronger. And I think that's why they've had such sustained success.
Right. So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing that what you're saying is true belief in the talent of your team and building on that. That's good. Okay. And then you would have to mentor them through if they fail and not say, why didn't you do this? But okay, that's okay. You tried. Let's support you in going further, because, we do have to have challenges or nothing happens. You can't build muscle without the micro tears. You just can't. Right?
100%.
So to me, I think a lot about that in business. Well, I know I can't build. I'm on a big binge right now to build muscle right now, Andre. I'm obsessed with it. Okay. So, and I thought, okay, I know now I have to sort of damage my muscles in a way, micro tearing, to build them. So you can't baby people and expect great results, because it's too predictable, and it's like a helicopter mom. Right now, I think by now it's pretty much been proven helicopter parenting does not work to develop children. It doesn't. I think tell me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of research on that now, that it wasn't really the best approach, because the kids just feel like they're being controlled and overprotected. And I'm not saying not to protect your children, but I mean, take risk as far as learning, and don't say good job every time your kid does something average that any kid should do. I, on purpose, never told my kids good job for something that was just average everyday development, because that made the bar really low. And I'm not a tiger mom either, but I would notice in the parks of New York City, because this is now 18 years ago when helicopter mom was really at its height. Okay. I remember thinking, that's extraordinary. That mom and dad are like applauding that kid like they just like had an Oscar-winning performance as a 2-year-old. And all the kid did was like get on his skateboard or get on one of those scooters. And I just thought, there's no way I'm ever going to praise my child for something so low. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like some cultures are helicopter momming their employees?
Yeah. I mean, I like the analogy for sure. I do. Often we see our employees as a very narrow version of themselves, right? You get into a job and you become literally just that job. And so people stop seeing you for all the other things that A, you could bring, and B, that you could potentially learn how to do. And so one of the things in the book is, through these teams we sort of studied, one of the things their leaders did really well is they trained and learned together, right? So we often in corporate America, we go off and we do a leadership training by ourselves. We come back and they're like, no, they actually do all their training and learning together in some really interesting and creative ways. I think the second thing they do is this concept of contributory confidence kind of plays on this idea of, I'm going to find a place where you can contribute in a way that you might not even recognize today. Right. So they sort of push on the edges of saying, and I remember talking to the guy that built the burning camp. And one of the things he did is, anytime someone pointed out a problem, he made them CEO of that problem.
Great. You figure it out.
He would say, you know what? Someone would say, hey, there's trash in our camp. We're not allowed. We got to leave. We can't leave anything behind. He's like, you're now the CEO of Leave Nothing Behind. It's now your job. Go and do it. I believe in you. And he just got people, that were volunteers to do all these things that A, they didn't think they could do before, and B, they treated it as if it's someone else's responsibility. And so I think between training and learning together, and also this idea of putting people in places where they can continue to contribute in new ways, sort of boost that idea of, it's not about celebrating that you did the one thing really well. It's about having confidence in you that you can continue to contribute over time in new and different ways, and we'll continue to learn together as we go.
Right. Now, you know what? In the end, Andre, all anybody ever wants is to be happy on this earth. Okay. And I was
True.
reading that actually what makes human beings the happiest is not like eating good food or watching a movie or doing all those or buying clothes. What makes us the happiest is a feeling of fulfillment.
That's right.
And nothing can replace that feeling of having done something and achieving something. Right? So what you're saying is we really need to help our teams have a feeling of that, oh, I achieved something, and not, oh, I'm just doing my job every day.
That's exactly right. And we know that happier employees who are fulfilled, they're 13% more productive than their counterparts, right? We also know that the things that get in their way, interestingly enough, time scarcity. I don't have time to learn. I don't have time to try something new. And then this idea of lack of perceived control, right? That gets to your helicopter parent, is that there's a lot of people out there that don't experience joy because they don't feel like they have autonomy and control over their work and their day. And if we just treated people a little bit more like the adults they are, then you would start to see fulfillment go up, and with it, engagement and happiness and joy, and lo and behold, productivity, which is what everyone's looking for right now in the workplace.
Right. So you're doing it the right way. And the funny thing is, I feel, and I remember there was a time in my life where I remember when I was really not doing that well and figuring out the mess. Okay. And I remember thinking, joy, where would I get time for that? I remember thinking that. Where would I get it's a luxury for some people, the feeling of joy. They just want to get through the day, right? So I feel like if we could start training people that yes, joy is possible, even if your life's not perfect yet, or never will be, by the way. But the better you do have more time for joy. That's just a fact. Like I'm full of joy. I got so much more time for joy since I'm doing better in my business. Okay. Because
Yeah,
it does
sure.
buy you time and latitude, I think, and some emotional space. But I do understand people going to their jobs, not ever getting ahead of it, never catching up. And it's like, joy, I'm just trying to get through this day. So maybe if there's some way, and it's hard for busy people to take that time out. I feel if people just say, look, I'm taking time out no matter what, half an hour just to do something that brings me joy, that could start building on it. Is that kind of how you work with people?
I think that's a really good starting point. It's this whole idea that we have to reduce the frustration people feel. I think a lot of what happens to us at work is there's just coordination cost everywhere, right? All these things that we have to do that aren't adding value, aren't fulfilling me, aren't making the company better. And yet they're just all this stuff that we force people to do at work that is just coordination cost. And so we become frustrated. And when we become frustrated, we start to orient our mind towards everything that's wrong.
And then
Right.
it's negative
And then
attitude.
negative. Yeah. So we have to start diminishing frustration while simultaneously increasing fulfillment, right? Giving people jobs that they can see how they connect to the larger purpose of the company, making sure that we see them as full humans, right? All the skills and experience they bring, don't limit them to this one little narrow thing that we hired them for. Let them come in and share the wealth of what they know. Because otherwise, you know what they're doing is, I say this every day to executives, creative energy is flowing every single day. Every single day and every single moment. It's just a question of what it's flowing to.
I agree.
When you're frustrated, it flows it towards, kind of ruminating.
Mm-hmm.
It flows towards making up all these stories about why they're wrong and I'm right. It flows towards coping with negative emotions. Or even worse is, I'll come in and mail in my Monday so I can go out and work on my side hustle and put all my creative energy into the other things I do outside your company. And so this idea of like, if we saw people as, instruments that want to bring more creativity and creative energy in the world, we might treat them different.
I love that. I have VAs that work, virtual assistants that work for me. And I say, hey, do you know how to do this? They go, no. I said, do you want to go just spend some time and figure that out? And they look at me like, what? I'm not being told what to do. So we need to figure that out. You just spend some time, go do some research, here's some of this, and then come back and tell me what you found. And I've gotten people to learn how to do things by just saying, it's just some research. Do you think you could do that? I could do that bit. Great. Okay, great. So do you think you could do this part? Yeah, I could do that. And I've shown them that they can actually learn things that they weren't saying they could do. And I see how much joy that brings some of them, that they're like, wow, I have a new skill and I learned it on her dollar. Okay. Because I'm like, that's okay. Just spend some time. And then we're going to meet and you just tell me what you found. And I go, good, that's great. Can you go do that? So
you just offered some real practices from the new book, right? 3 things you did that were core to building confidence. 1, contributory confidence. You allowed someone to contribute in a new way. Secondly, is you learn together. Come back and share with me your research and what you learned, right?
Yeah.
And third is by letting them make it a research project, it's easy to have a low stakes win.
Exactly, because it's not go do the job. Just figure that out for me. Well, I don't know how to. That's okay. Here, I'll help you. Let's get on ChatGPT together and we do that. Oh, great. I just found 10 resources. You can use those. Could you just do what I just showed you on ChatGPT and find some more? Yeah, I think I could do that. And then they have, a foot in the door, and then they're doing something they never dreamt they could do because it wasn't in their job description. And it's not that hard really, because a lot of this stuff isn't that hard. It's just the mindset that people, not the VAs, but people can learn something new, but they need some support with that and a little bit of space. Just a little bit of space. Like, just show me. Okay, that looks great. Well, I don't know. Then we talk about it. And I said, great. Well, let's do this. Should we do that? What do you think? Well, I don't know. What do you think? Well, I think we should do that. Great. Let's try that then. Then they have agency, which is important. And I'm not saying I'm the best leader in the world, but what I like saying to people, go figure it out. I'm good because I don't want a helicopter mom. I hate managing people. I love when they self-manage, and I love getting to the point where like, how's that going? And I think that we don't have to have that many meetings, quite frankly. I think that meetings are far overrated. We only have meetings when you have to. If things are well, let's just check in. So anyway, this has been highly interesting. So, André, before we finish this episode, what's one mindset or psychological stance that you hold that could help people with their lives? What's your motto or something? What's some gem? It can be a platitude. I don't care.
Well, I'll share with you just a practice I had that started in COVID, and probably was part of my life forever. But we put together a gratitude wall in our garage. Every day we went out and wrote 3 little things that we have gratitude for in the day. And the days were small and there was nothing happening and they were scary. And I think that idea of a gratitude practice, because you're surrounded by things that are ultimately fascinating, right? The company that you don't want to work at anymore, it's still a fascinating place, right? The mundane things you pass by every day and fail to see are super fascinating. And I think if we can start having a little bit more gratitude for the smaller things in our lives, I think that helps the bigger things feel less daunting. And so I don't do a lot of things right, but I have a lot of gratitude for a lot of little things in my life. And, it gets me through the day without problems. So
I'm totally with you. That's part of my happiness. And people laugh because my gratitudes are very, very micro. It's like, I'm really glad we have leftovers in the fridge today because we don't have to cook here tonight. And it's true though, the more you practice gratitude, it just grows and grows, and it does grow a positive mental attitude for sure.
Oh, it lowers cortisol. It improves your satisfaction with your life. And there's been studies that over the long term, it will actually decrease the number of times you go to the doctor.
Wow.
And so if you can't get behind a daily practice for, all the happiness reasons, it will actually contribute to a longer life.
Right. It's so easy though, just to write down. I mean, I do more than 3, but it is easy just to say, I'm going to write 3 things down, like just 3. But actually that's part of that gratitude is just 3. I do more, but the practice is just write 3 things down. How hard could that be? Right. But actually I don't go to the doctor very much, actually. Rarely.
Well, maybe that's a gratitude practice.
Maybe.
Working out. The other thing I'd say is start your day, on your front foot, right? Start with gratitude. Start with something you want to accomplish. Start with a good meal. Start with something that isn't desk scrolling on your phone, that isn't watching the news, because we know the news isn't sort of fulfilling at this point. But I think just being really mindful of like the way you start your day gets you rolling in one direction or the other.
Oh, I'm totally on board with that. I agree,
Yeah.
1,000,000%. Dr. André, thank you for being here. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope that you subscribe. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.